Hello, Destinites, and welcome to the Fabian Strategy Year 2 review. So this gun was, in the first year, was basically played with the issue that it's kind of like exotic buff. Front lines was not pulling its weight. So Destiny has gone about trying to address this issue, and then the question becomes, now that they've addressed the issue, has it been addressed to the point where you're going to want to use this weapon now? That's the big question. But first, kind of lifted from their opinion here, I can say. So here is the Bungie's opinion of the gun previously. It was the effect of front lines is subtle and requires close attention to notice. This is a way for them to say that front lines isn't really doing anything and is a piece of crap. The new approach to front lines focuses on a more tangible experience. So what they've done to front lines now is they've increased the base rate of fire stat, and they push the weapon up to the fastest firing auto rifle archetype, enabling the weapon to do more damage in less time as long as you don't miss. The visceral reply of the weapon as it cranks through the magazine feels much more appropriate for a Titan on the front lines, and the already ample stability boost helps keep the rounds tight and focused. The new approach exposed a few bugs with the magazine and inconsistencies, so they needed to retrofit the stat upgrade perks with new options. Front lines, here's the changes. The front lines no longer buffs rate of fire as a bonus modifier. Front lines now increases the base rate of the fire stat to the highest speed. Damage per bullet is offset to match the high rate of fire archetype. So like that basically means it's just that because you're doing that many more bullets per second, they needed to make it be that you weren't doing the same damage as though it were like one of these artillery shell low firing rates. Then they messed around with the perks, but since I've got the perks in front of us here, we don't need to be so much concerned with that. So you've got crowd control, grants bonus damage for a short time after you've gotten a kill. Very, very cool. That's nice. Love the bonus damage. I really like high stability with auto rifles. This is my personal preference. The CQB ballistics, greatly reduced recoil, significant penalty to range, and I've gotten this kind of balance out with the rest of my perks. We've got here life support, weapons, kills with this weapon while critically wounded have a chance to start regenerating health. That is very useful and in both cases of PvE and PvP, so that's going to be useful for you. We've got the choice here where if your preference is a high reload rate, you have the flared magwell, you're going to bring your range way down. There's an option for you. That's obviously, as you can see, what I've selected, not what I'm so interested in. Lightweight. When held, this weapon grants +2 character agility. This is very build dependent, so if you were going for something a little more agile, sure, but I like to kind of be the tank when I play my Titan, so that's not so much a concern of mine. I'd rather have armor over agility. So I went with the rifled barrel. The rifled barrel is, I believe that's actually being added in the way that they had to mess around with all the different perks that are available. I went with rifled barrel, and it increases the range. And then finally you have front lines. This weapon has increased handling, stability, and rate of fire when enemies are close. So looking at the stats of this, it to me looks like a pretty good assault rifle when I've compared it with other assault rifles kind of in the same category. Perk-wise and statistically speaking, it seems as though it should be competition for these. But now I'm going to talk about the player versus player experience with it, and I've got to say, I just still don't like it. I got warmed up, I got into a couple games, and I was doing pretty good with this. But overall, there's a couple things that annoy me about the way that this gun works, is that usually when you have a gun that's working for you in PvP, it's as a result of finding a groove with that weapon. You know how it feels, you can predict it in each situation, and that allows you to move from each encounter with success. Now, front lines, because it only procs when you are near people and you're not always sure when you're going to be near people, they might come from behind or the side. I mean, obviously, if you're watching your radar, but it's hard to predict exactly when this perk will activate. And I actually found, as satisfying as it was, we're talking subjectively just fun to have your rate of fire to suddenly boost and skyrocket, it was jarring to your focus. Whereas if you have a predictable rate of fire, then you basically have better stability. Basically, your stability increases yes, as a result of this, but because you have a change mid-encounter as you're fighting people, I found that the front lines was actually kind of jarred me out of the flow that I was getting when I was using the weapon, and so was not that useful. And a couple times I was like, oh, I was too surprised by it. Now, after maybe some time spent playing, this sort of like, you would become used to, as I say, that style of play where you're like, oh, I will randomly have the fire rate jacked up on this. But it really was preventative, at least after playing for a couple of hours with it, from quickly finding a groove. And I compare this to something like Monte Carlo, where I can, like, I don't even need to warm up with the Monte Carlo. I can just go in and shred with it, and it's awesome. I don't like the front lines still. Although, I will say this in the weapon's defense. I've kind of started to understand the Fabian strategy. It's more of, this is a weapon that's in idea, it's good. And maybe then you could enjoy this weapon in PvE, where it's not so important that single kill that you arrive at, and it's more about the experience and kind of like a role play, imagining yourself in the scenario that you're in, where it's not, life or respawn. And that could be fun for you, but I really don't like the front lines. I never have. It was useless before. Now when the change occurs, it occurs and jars you out of the flow that you're experiencing in your PvP. So I can't really recommend it amongst the others that you have to choose from. I would recommend something like the Zalo Supercell or the Monte Carlo, or even going into different rates of fire for auto rifles, but I would not recommend the Fabian strategy, unfortunately. One other detail that I'd like to talk about. Now, again, this is personal preference, but I think others might agree. When you're looking at this weapon, you've got barrel options now. Yeah, that's good, and they affect all sorts of things. I don't like that you are stuck with one scope. This type of scope that's up top here, that type of scope I have never enjoyed. It's this little bead. You can grow more used to it with practicing, but if you have scopes out of the box that are going to work better for you and show you, return on investment of time sooner, I would go with those scopes every single day of the week. I don't like this little P shot in the middle scope that's given to you by the Fabian strategy, and I don't like that you can't switch it up. So it's strange, on paper, the Fabian strategy, you might give, a really high rating, especially you could consider as well that auto rifles have been buffed recently, although less than we thought. But when it comes down to actual play experience, the Fabian strategy, in my opinion, remains a steaming pile of crap. So, get it if you're into the lore and the idea of being a Titan on the front lines and playing some PvE and having some fun with it. But if you're going to go into the Crucible, I would recommend, as I said, a couple of other options. I would not recommend this one. So, thanks for checking out the video. Please do like, subscribe, and share. And if you're enjoying these reviews, please do stop by for some more in the future. But for now, that is the Great Owl signing off. Peace.